The moment I found my fiancé in bed with my cousin on our wedding day, I didn't cry. I smiled. Because while Marco DeLuca thought he owned me, I'd spent 6 months building the perfect trap, and he was about to walk straight into it. My name is Adriana Varelli, and this is the story of how I turned my own wedding into a weapon. If you want to see how far revenge can take a woman who's been pushed too far, stay until the end. And don't forget to hit that like button and comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. The bedroom door opened without a sound. Adriana had learned to move quietly over the past 3 years, learned to enter rooms like a ghost, to exist without disturbing the air around her. Marco preferred it that way, said a woman should know how to move through a man's space without demanding attention. She'd believed him once, believed a lot of things he'd told her. The morning sunlight cut through the curtains of Marco's penthouse bedroom in sharp golden lines, illuminating dust particles that drifted like tiny, careless witnesses. Adriana had come upstairs to bring him his espresso, the way she did every morning when she stayed over. The way a good fiancé should, according to Marco's mother. According to Marco's expectations. According to the life Adriana had been carefully molded into for longer than she cared to remember. Her hand steadied on the silver tray. She'd selected his favorite cup, the one with the DeLuca family crest embossed in gold. She'd made the espresso exactly how he liked it. 2 shots, no sugar, precisely 90 seconds after the water reached boiling. The door to his bedroom stood half open. That should have been her first warning. Marco always closed doors. Privacy was power, he'd told her once, during one of his lectures about maintaining control in business and life. People who left doors open were weak, careless, unworthy of respect. Adriana's heels clicked softly against the marble floor as she approached. She could hear sounds from inside the room, movement, breathing, something else she couldn't quite identify. Her mind supplied helpful, innocent explanations. He was on a phone call. He was doing his morning exercises. The tray slipped from her fingers. It didn't fall. Some instinct made her catch it, grip it so hard her knuckles went white against the silver. But the espresso cup rattled in its saucer, a tiny sound that seemed enormous in the sudden vacuum of her understanding. Marco DeLuca, her fiancé of 3 years, the man she was supposed to marry in exactly 4 hours, was in bed with another woman. Not just any woman. Julia, her cousin. Her cousin. The girl who'd helped her pick out her wedding dress, who'd been her maid of honor since they were children playing wedding with bedsheets and garden flowers, who'd promised, just last night at the rehearsal dinner, that today would be the happiest day of Adriana's life. They didn't notice her at first, too caught up in each other, in the tangle of expensive sheets and naked limbs, and betrayal so thick Adriana could taste it like copper on her tongue. She should have screamed, should have thrown the tray, should have collapsed into tears and hysterics the way women did in movies, in books, in all the stories about moments like this. Instead, Adriana stood perfectly still and felt something inside her chest crack open like an egg. And what poured out wasn't grief. It was clarity. Marco saw her first. He didn't startle, didn't even have the decency to look surprised. He simply lifted his head from where it had been buried against Julia's neck and met Adriana's eyes with that same cold assessment he used when evaluating a business deal. Adriana. His voice was steady, calm, like she'd caught him reading the newspaper instead of fucking her cousin in the bed where she'd slept beside him dozens of times. "You're early," Julia finally noticed. She gasped, actually gasped like a bad actress in a worse play, and tried to cover herself with the sheet. Her face flushed red, but Adriana noticed her eyes. Sharp, calculating, not apologetic, triumphant. "I brought your espresso," Adriana heard herself say. Her voice sounded strange, distant, like it belonged to someone else entirely. Marco sat up, utterly unself-conscious in his nakedness. He'd always been comfortable in his skin, in his power, in his absolute certainty that the world would bend to his will. At 34, he was everything the DeLuca family had groomed him to be. Ruthless, ambitious, and completely convinced of his own invincibility. "Put it on the dresser," he said. Adriana didn't move. Marco's jaw tightened. It was the only crack in his composure, that tiny flex of muscle that meant his patience was thinning. She'd learned to read those signs over the years, learned to anticipate his moods the way you'd study weather patterns before a storm. "Did you hear me?" he asked. His tone dropped lower, softer. the voice he used right before his temper broke. "I heard you," Adriana said. "Then do what I told you." Something in Julia's expression shifted. She was watching them both now, and Adriana could see the exact moment her cousin realized this wasn't playing out the way she'd expected. Whatever scene Julia had imagined, tears, shouting, maybe even violence, this wasn't it. Adriana walked forward slowly and set the tray on the dresser. The espresso had stopped steaming. It would be cold now. Ruined. She turned back to face them. "The wedding is in 4 hours," she said quietly. Marco smiled. It was the smile he used in boardrooms when he knew he'd already won. "I know. You think I'm still going to marry you?" "I know you are." He stood up, still naked, still completely unbothered by any of this. He crossed to where his robe hung on the bathroom door and slipped it on with casual grace. "But because you're a smart woman, Adriana, and smart women understand how the world works." Julia was sitting up now, sheet clutched to her chest, eyes darting between them like she was watching a tennis match. "Enlighten me," Adriana said. Her voice still sounded weird, hollow. Marco tied his robe and walked toward her. He moved like a predator, smooth, confident, utterly certain of his dominance. When he reached her, he lifted one hand and touched her face with a gentleness that would have looked loving to anyone who didn't know better. "You belong to me," he said simply. "You have for 3 years. Your father gave you to me when his business was failing and he needed the DeLuca name to survive. You think that's changed because you walked in on something you weren't supposed to see?" His thumb traced her cheekbone. Behind him, Julia watched with something like fascination in her eyes. "This doesn't mean anything," Marco continued. His voice was almost kind now, patient, like he was explaining basic arithmetic to a child. "Julia knows her place. You know yours. In 4 hours, you'll put on that dress, walk down that aisle, and become my wife. But because that's what's been decided. That's what's best for both our families. And because..." His grip on her face tightened just enough to hurt. "You don't have any other choice." Adriana looked into his eyes. Dark brown, almost black. She'd once thought they were beautiful, soulful. Now she saw them clearly for the first time, empty. Not cruel, not passionate, not anything, just empty. "You're right," she said softly. Marco's smile widened. "I knew you'd understand." "I do understand. Finally." She stepped back out of his grip. "I'll see you at the altar." She turned and walked toward the door. Behind her, she heard Julia's nervous laugh, heard Marco's satisfied exhale, heard him say something to her cousin in Italian, something possessive and crude that made Julia giggle. Adriana's hand found the doorknob. "Oh, and Adriana?" Marco called after her. She paused, but didn't turn around. "Wear the diamond earrings I gave you, the big ones. I want everyone to see that you're mine." Adriana opened the door and walked out. She made it to the elevator, down 30 floors, through the lobby, past the doorman who wished her a good morning and congratulations on her wedding day, out into the bright, brutal sunlight of a perfect June morning in Manhattan. Then she pulled out her phone and made a call she'd been preparing to make for 6 months. He answered on the first ring. "Ethan," she said. Her voice was steady now, clear. "It's time." 3 months earlier, Adriana had been crying in a bathroom stall at the Mandarin Oriental. It was a charity gala, one of dozens she attended on Marco's arm, playing the role of devoted fiancé while he networked with the kind of people who measured their worth in billions and their influence in governments toppled. She'd excused herself from their table. Marco had been deep in conversation with a Russian oligarch and hadn't noticed her leave, and locked herself in the furthest stall from the door. She'd learned to cry silently years ago. Learned to do it quickly, efficiently, in stolen moments where no one could see her weakness. She was washing her face when she heard the bathroom door open. "It's occupied," she called out, keeping her voice level. "I can see that." Adriana looked up at the mirror. A man stood in the doorway of the women's bathroom, completely unfazed by the fact that he was violating about 6 different social protocols. He was tall, maybe 6'2", with dark hair that was slightly too long to be corporate and eyes that were too sharp to miss much. "This is the ladies' room," Adriana said. "I know." He stepped inside and let the door close behind him. "Ethan Cross. And you're Adriana Varelli." She recognized the name. Everyone in Manhattan's upper echelons knew Ethan Cross. Self-made tech entrepreneur who'd built a software empire before 30 and now spent his time investing in startups and, according to the gossip columns, breaking hearts with the same efficiency he broke markets. Mr. Cross, I don't know what you think. You've been crying, he interrupted. Not unkindly, just stating a fact. And before you tell me you're fine, you should know I don't believe in social pleasantries. They're a waste of time. Adriana stared at him. You followed me into a bathroom to tell me that? I followed you because I've been watching you all night. He leaned against the marble counter, utterly relaxed. You're very good at pretending. The smiles, the attentive nods, the way you touch Marco DeLuca's arm at exactly the right moments to make it look like you're invested in his conversations. Most people would buy it completely. Her heart started beating faster. I don't know what you're talking about. Yes, you do. His eyes held hers in the mirror. I've seen that look before. On my sister's face, right before she finally left her husband. The one who put her in the hospital twice before she found the courage to run. Adriana's hands gripped the edge of the sink. Does he hit you? Ethan asked quietly. No. The word came out automatically, defensive. Then what does he do? She should have left. Should have pushed past this stranger and returned to Marco's side and continued playing the role she'd perfected over 3 years of slowly disappearing into the expectations everyone had for her. Instead, she heard herself say, everything else. Ethan nodded like she'd just confirmed something he already knew. How long have you been planning to leave him? I'm not... Don't lie to me, Adriana. You're too smart for that, and I'm too observant to fall for it. He pulled a business card from his jacket and set it on the counter between them. When you're ready, not if, when, call this number. I can help. Why would you help me? You don't even know me. No, he agreed. But I know men like Marco DeLuca. I've spent the last decade making sure people like him don't win. He pushed off the counter and walked toward the door. The offer stands, no strings, no expectations, just options. He left before she could respond. Adriana stared at the business card for a long moment. Then she picked it up, slipped it into her clutch, and went back to the gala. She called him 2 days later. Otem, I need to understand what I'm dealing with, Ethan had said during their first real meeting. They'd met at a coffee shop in Brooklyn, far from Manhattan's watchful eyes and gossiping circles. Adriana had told Marco she was visiting her grandmother in Queens. He hadn't cared enough to verify. What do you want to know? Adriana asked. Everything. Start with how you met him. She told him the story. How her father's construction company had been failing. How the DeLuca family had offered to bail him out for a price. How that price had been Adriana herself, delivered to Marco's door like a business merger wrapped in white lace and false promises. I was 21, she said, staring into her coffee. I don't know what I thought. That maybe he'd fall in love with me. That it could become real. And instead he treated me like a project, something to be shaped and controlled and displayed when useful. She looked up at Ethan. He doesn't love me. I don't think he loves anything except power, but he won't let me go either. To him, I'm just another asset, another possession. Ethan had listened to all of it without interrupting. When she finished, he leaned back in his chair and studied her with those two sharp eyes. What do you want? He asked. I want out. No. He shook his head. What do you want? If you could have anything, do anything, be anyone, what would you choose? No one had ever asked her that. Not her father, who'd seen her as a solution to his problems. Not Marco, who'd seen her as a decorative extension of his empire. Not even herself, who'd stopped asking that question somewhere around year 2 of playing the role of Marco's perfect, obedient fiancé. I want, she said slowly, to make him feel what he made me feel. Small, powerless. Like nothing he does matters. Ethan smiled. It was the kind of smile that made venture capitalists nervous and competitors start updating their resumes. Then let's build you an exit strategy, he said. One that doesn't just free you, one that destroys him. Over the next 6 months, Adriana became a spy in her own life. Ethan taught her how to document everything. The business dealings Marco discussed over dinner, not realizing she was listening. The phone calls he took in his study, not knowing she'd installed recording software on his devices. The meetings with associates whose names appeared on FBI watch lists, the offshore accounts he thought were hidden, the bribes and threats, and carefully orchestrated illegalities that kept the DeLuca empire running. She learned to be two people: the compliant fiancé Marco expected, and the woman gathering ammunition for a war he didn't know was coming. "You're good at this," Ethan had told her during one of their secret meetings. They'd started meeting weekly, always in different locations, always careful. "Scarily good. I've had practice being someone I'm not," Adriana had replied. "No." He'd looked at her intently. "This is who you actually are. You've just been forced to hide it." She hadn't known what to say to that. Their relationship stayed professional. Ethan never made a move, never suggested their arrangement was anything other than what it appeared to be: a wealthy man helping a woman escape an intolerable situation. But Adriana noticed things. The way he listened when she talked, really listened, like her words mattered. The way he treated her like an equal partner in planning her escape, instead of a victim who needed saving. The way he looked at her sometimes, when he thought she wasn't paying attention, like she was something more than just pretty, more than just useful, like she was worth fighting for. "When this is over," he'd said once, "what will you do?" "I don't know," she'd admitted. "I've spent so long being what other people needed me to be. I'm not sure who I am without that." "Then we'll figure it out," Ethan had said simply. "Together, if you want, or alone, if you'd prefer, but you'll figure it out." That was the moment Adriana realized she'd developed feelings for him. Not because he was rescuing her, she was rescuing herself. He was just providing tools and support, but because he saw her as a person capable of her own rescue, because he believed in her competence, her strength, her right to choose her own future. She'd never felt that before. Now, standing on the sidewalk outside Marco's building on her wedding day, with the image of her fiancé and cousin burned into her retinas, Adriana waited for Ethan to respond to her signal. "I'm on my way," he said. His voice was calm, steady. "Where are you?" "Outside his building." "Ethan, it happened exactly like you said it might. He's not even trying to hide it anymore. He thinks—" Her voice cracked slightly. "He thinks I have no choice but to marry him anyway." "Do you?" It was a genuine question, no judgment in it, just an honest inquiry about what she wanted to do next. Adriana looked up at the gleaming tower where Marco lived in his penthouse kingdom, probably already back in bed with Julia, completely confident that his fiancé would obey him in the end, because she always had before. "No," she said. "I don't." "Good." She could hear the smile in Ethan's voice. "Because I have an idea. It's insane, and it's risky, and if it works, Marco will never recover from the humiliation. Tell me." He did. When he finished explaining, Adriana was quiet for a long moment. "That's—" she started. "Insane?" Ethan offered. "Perfect," she corrected. "It's absolutely perfect." And the wedding was set to take place at the Plaza Hotel at 2 o'clock. Adriana arrived at 11. Her bridesmaids were already there: Julia, 3 of Marco's cousins, and 2 girls from Adriana's college days who distanced themselves once she'd become engaged to a DeLuca. They probably thought they were protecting themselves from contamination by association. They weren't wrong. Julia looked nervous when Adriana walked into the bridal suite. Good. She should be. "Adriana!" Julia rushed forward, arms outstretched for a hug Adriana didn't return. "I was starting to worry. You're late." "Am I?" Adriana moved past her cousin and headed straight for the dress. It hung on a mannequin by the window, a custom Vera Wang creation that had cost more than most people's cars. Marco had chosen it, naturally. "You okay?" Julia asked. Her voice had that fake concern women used when they wanted to appear caring but were really just fishing for information. "You seem different." Adriana turned to face her, really looked at her cousin for the first time in years. Julia was pretty in a conventional way, blonde, petite, the kind of girl men called sweet and women called basic behind her back. They'd been close once before Adriana's engagement, before Julia had decided that stealing her cousin's fiancé was somehow an acceptable life choice. "I'm fine," Adriana said. She kept her voice light, easy, The way Marco had taught her to speak when she wanted to hide what she was really thinking. Better than fine, actually. Today's my wedding day. Something flickered in Julia's eyes. Confusion, maybe. Or disappointment that Adriana wasn't breaking down the way she'd clearly expected. The other bridesmaids fluttered around, chattering about flowers and seating arrangements and how handsome Marco looked in his tuxedo. Adriana let their words wash over her while she went through the motions of getting ready. Makeup, hair, the dress that felt like a costume for a play she'd never wanted to star in. At 1:30, her father arrived. Vincent Virelli looked older than his 58 years. The stress of nearly losing his business, and then of giving away his daughter to save it, had carved deep lines into his face and turned his hair completely gray. He'd never been a demonstrative man, but he'd loved Adriana in his way. Or at least, he'd loved her until loving her became less important than saving his company. "You look beautiful," he said when he saw her. "Thank you, Papa." "Adriana, He stopped, started again. "I want you to know that It's fine, Papa." She cut him off, kept her voice gentle. There was no point in having this conversation now. Everything's going to be exactly as it should be. He looked relieved that she wasn't going to make him explain himself. Explain why he'd traded his daughter like livestock to save his business. Explain why Marco DeLuca's money had mattered more than his child's happiness. At 1:45, the wedding coordinator popped her head in. 15 minutes, everyone." The bridesmaids lined up. Julia took her place at the front as maid of honor, avoiding Adriana's eyes. Guilty conscience, probably. Or maybe just fear that Adriana would make a scene and ruin everything. She wouldn't. The scene that was coming would be so much worse than anything Julia could imagine. At exactly 2 o'clock, the music started. Adriana took her father's arm and let him lead her toward the ballroom where 300 guests waited to witness her surrender, masquerading as a celebration. The doors opened, and Adriana Virelli walked toward the future she'd been forced into, and the revenge she'd been planning for the last 6 months. The ballroom was a cathedral of wealth and expectation. Crystal chandeliers cast fractured light across 300 faces turned toward the center aisle, like flowers following the sun. Adriana recognized most of them, business associates of the DeLuca family, politicians who'd been bought and paid for, socialites whose entire existence revolved around being seen at events exactly like this one. Her own family occupied the left side of the room, smaller in number and significance. Her mother dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief, playing the role of emotional parent, even though she'd stopped asking Adriana how she felt about marrying Marco approximately 2 weeks after the engagement announcement. The music swelled. Pachelbel's canon in D, because Marco's mother had insisted on tradition. Adriana's heels clicked against the white carpet runner in perfect rhythm. 1 step, 2 steps, 3. Her father's arm was rigid beneath her hand, his breathing slightly uneven. Nervous, probably. This wedding represented the culmination of his deal with the devil, his daughter's life in exchange for the DeLuca family's investment in his failing company. She could feel the weight of the guests' stares, judging her dress, her makeup, the way she held her bouquet of white roses, wondering if she was pretty enough, polished enough, worthy enough to marry into the DeLuca dynasty. None of them knew they were about to witness something that would be talked about in Manhattan's elite circles for years. Marco stood at the altar in a custom Tom Ford tuxedo, flanked by his groomsmen, his brother Antonio, 2 cousins, and his best friend since childhood, a man named Luca, who ran the DeLuca family's security operations. Translation: he broke legs when people didn't pay their debts on time. Marco's face wore an expression of satisfied possession as he watched Adriana approach. He'd won. That's what his eyes said. He'd fucked her cousin this morning, proven his absolute dominance, and she was still walking toward him like an obedient pet returning to its master. Adriana's grip tightened on her bouquet. 20 feet from the altar. 15. 10. Her father released her arm and stepped back. The minister, a man the DeLuca family kept on retainer for occasions like this, opened his mouth to begin the ceremony. Adriana stopped walking. The music continued for 3 more measures before the pianist realized something was wrong and lifted his hands from the keys. The silence that followed was deafening. "Adriana?" Marco's voice was low, controlled, but she could hear the warning in it. She didn't move, didn't speak, just stood there, perfectly still, in the middle of the aisle. Adriana. Sharper now. Less question, more command. The guests began to murmur. Confusion rippled through the crowd like wind across water. On the left side of the room, Adriana's mother half rose from her seat, one hand pressed to her chest in alarm. Marco took a step forward, breaking protocol. His jaw was tight, that tiny muscle flexing the way it always did right before his temper snapped. "What are you doing?" Adriana turned, not toward Marco, not toward the minister or the altar or any part of the future that had been written for her by men who thought women were commodities to be traded. She turned toward the back of the ballroom. The doors opened. Ethan Cross walked through them like he owned the building. Hell, for all Adriana knew, he might actually own it. His real estate portfolio was extensive enough that the plaza could easily be part of it. He wore a tuxedo identical to Marco's, right down to the white rose boutonniere, and he moved with the kind of confidence that came from building an empire from nothing and knowing you could do it again if you had to. The murmuring exploded into shocked exclamations. "Who is that? Is that Ethan Cross? What the hell is going on?" Marco's face went from confused to furious in the span of a heartbeat. "What the fuck do you think you're doing?" Ethan didn't acknowledge him. He walked straight down the aisle, his eyes locked on Adriana's, and when he reached her, he extended his hand. She took it. His fingers were warm, steady, real in a way that made everything else feel like a fever dream she was finally waking up from. "You sure about this?" Ethan asked quietly, his voice pitched for her ears only. "I've never been more sure of anything in my life." He smiled. Then he turned to face Marco, putting himself between Adriana and the man who'd claimed ownership of her for the past 3 years. "Adriana won't be marrying you today," Ethan said, his voice carried across the ballroom with perfect clarity. "Or any day." Marco looked like he'd been slapped. Then his expression shifted into something darker, more dangerous. "You have 10 seconds to get the fuck out of here before I have you thrown out." "I don't think so." Ethan's tone was pleasant, almost friendly. "See, that would require your security team to actually be loyal to you, which they're not anymore." He gestured toward the edges of the room. Adriana followed his gaze and saw men in dark suits positioned at every exit. They weren't Marco's people. They were Ethan's. Marco saw them too. His hand moved toward his jacket, probably going for the phone he always carried, ready to call in reinforcements. "I wouldn't," Ethan said calmly. "Your phone won't work. We've jammed all signals in the building. No calls in or out until we're done here." "You can't," Marco started. "I can," Ethan interrupted. "And I am, because Adriana asked me to." All eyes turned to her. Adriana could feel the weight of their stares, their judgment, their confusion. Her mother looked like she might faint. Her father had gone pale. Julia stood frozen among the bridesmaids, her face a mask of shock. "Adriana, baby, listen to me." Marco's voice changed, softened. He tried to step around Ethan, reaching for her. "Whatever he told you, whatever lies, you were in bed with my cousin this morning," Adriana said. The ballroom went silent. You could have heard a pin drop. Hell, you could have heard a thought form in the collective consciousness of 300 people simultaneously realizing they were witnessing the social event of the decade. Marco's reaching hand froze mid-air. "That's true," Adriana finished. "I brought you espresso at 8:30, found you with Julia. You told me the wedding would proceed as planned because I belong to you and I don't have a choice." Julia made a small, strangled sound. Several of the bridesmaids turned to stare at her. She looked like she wanted to disappear into the floor. "You're confused," Marco said, his voice taking on that patient, condescending tone he used when explaining why she was wrong about something. "You're nervous about the wedding and you've misinterpreted—" "I have recordings," Adriana said. That stopped him cold. "What?" "Recordings. Of this morning, of dozens of mornings, of phone calls and business meetings and every illegal thing you've done for the past 6 months." She looked at him the way he'd always looked at her, like he was something small and inconsequential. "I've been documenting everything, Marco. Every bribe, every threat, every offshore account. The FBI is particularly interested in your arrangements with the Calabrese family, and that construction contract you secured through intimidation and violence." Marco's face had gone white. "You're lying." "No." Ethan pulled a small drive from his pocket. "She's not. And this contains copies of everything, just in case you're thinking about trying to silence anyone after today. This is insane. Marco looked around the room, appealing to the guests like they were a jury he could sway. You're all witnessing this. She's clearly having some kind of breakdown. The stress of the wedding, the stress of being controlled and manipulated for 3 years, you mean? Adriana's voice was steady, clear. The stress of being treated like property instead of a person? Of being told I belong to you while you fuck whoever you want? Her mother gasped. Several of the older women in the crowd clutched their pearls, literally. But Adriana noticed something else too. Some of the women were leaning forward, their faces rapt with attention. Like they were watching someone do something they'd always wanted to do but never had the courage. Adriana, think about what you're doing. Marco's voice had dropped to that dangerous quiet that usually preceded violence. Think about your family, your father's business. Everything will be destroyed if I what? Choose myself for once? She laughed, and it felt good. Liberating. My father made his choice when he sold me to you. He can live with the consequences. Vincent Varelli stood up. Adriana, please, you don't understand. I understand perfectly, Papa. You needed money. Marco needed a decorative wife. I was the solution to both problems. She looked at her father, really looked at him. Did you even ask me if I wanted to marry him? Or did you just assume I'd be grateful for the opportunity? He didn't answer. Couldn't answer, probably, without admitting the truth. This is enough. Marco's voice had gone cold now. The patient act was over. You want to embarrass me? Fine. Enjoy your little moment. But when this is done, when everyone goes home, you're going to remember who you're dealing with. You're going to remember what happens to people who cross the DeLuca family. Is that a threat? Ethan asked mildly. It's a promise. Interesting. Ethan gestured toward the back of the room. Because I'm pretty sure making threats in front of 300 witnesses, including 2 federal judges, a district attorney, and at least 4 people currently under investigation for their connections to organized crime, isn't the smartest move you could make right now. Marco's eyes darted around the room, finally registering the faces in the crowd. Judge Morrison in the 3rd row. D.A. Castellano near the back. The FBI had been building a case against the DeLuca family for years, and Marco had just invited half the legal establishment to watch him threaten a woman who'd just announced she had evidence of his crimes. You set me up, he said to Adriana. No, she corrected. You set yourself up. I just documented it. Antonio, Marco's brother, started moving through the crowd toward them. Ethan's security team intercepted him smoothly, professionally, without making a scene but making it very clear he wasn't getting any closer. Let me ask you something, Marco, Ethan said conversationally. Did you really think a woman smart enough to run your household, manage your schedule, coordinate with your business associates, and navigate your family politics for 3 years wasn't smart enough to figure out what you were doing? Wasn't smart enough to protect herself? Marco's fists clenched at his sides. This isn't over. You're right, Adriana said. It's not, because there's one more thing. She reached out and took Ethan's other hand, so she was holding both of them, facing Marco with the man who'd actually seen her as an equal standing beside her. Since we have a minister here, and a ballroom full of guests, and a very expensive wedding cake in the other room, she said, it seems wasteful not to have a wedding. Marco's face went from white to red. What? Adriana turned to Ethan. You still have that marriage license? He pulled it from his inside pocket. Right here. A marriage license? Marco's voice cracked. What marriage license? The one I applied for 2 weeks ago, Adriana said. When Ethan Cross asked me to marry him and I said yes. The ballroom erupted. Shouting, gasps, chaos. Marco lunged forward, but Ethan's security was already there, holding him back without hurting him, just preventing him from reaching Adriana. Antonio was yelling something in Italian. Julia had sunk into a chair, her face buried in her hands. The DeLuca family matriarch, Marco's mother, looked like she might have a stroke. Adriana's mother actually did faint. Someone caught her. Through it all, Adriana stood perfectly still, holding Ethan's hands, feeling more present in her own skin than she had in years. You can't do this, Marco was shouting. I'll sue you. I'll destroy you, both of you. With what money? Ethan asked calmly. Because I have it on good authority that the FBI will be freezing your assets tomorrow morning. along with your father's, your brother's, and approximately 47 offshore accounts belonging to various DeLuca family members and associates. Marco went completely still. That's not possible. It is when you have 6 months of detailed financial records showing exactly where the money came from and where it went. Ethan looked at Adriana. Your fiancée is very thorough. Meticulous, really. She missed nothing. You did this, Marco said to Adriana. His voice was barely above a whisper now, all the rage compressed into something cold and deadly. You actually did this. I did, she confirmed, because you made one very stupid assumption, Marco. You assumed I was weak, that I'd stay broken, that I had no choice but to accept whatever you decided to do to me. She took a step closer to him, close enough to see the hatred burning in his eyes. You were wrong. For a moment, she thought he might actually try to hurt her despite Ethan's security. His whole body was vibrating with fury, hands shaking, jaw clenched so tight she could hear his teeth grinding. Then he smiled. It was a terrible smile, the kind that promised retribution. You think you've won, he said softly. You think you've beaten me. But you have no idea what you've started, no idea what's coming. I know exactly what's coming, Adriana replied. Investigations, arrests, the complete dismantling of everything your family built on the backs of people you hurt. She paused. And you get to watch it happen from a prison cell. We'll see about that. Ethan nodded to his security team. Escort Mr. DeLuca and his family out of the building, please. They're no longer welcome at this wedding. Marco opened his mouth to protest, but Antonio grabbed his arm. Marco, come on. We need to call Dad. We need lawyers. Now. For a second, it looked like Marco might refuse, might cause an actual scene beyond what had already happened. But some survival instinct kicked in, probably the same instinct that had kept the DeLuca family in power for 3 generations, and he let Antonio pull him toward the exit. As they passed Adriana, Marco stopped and leaned in close enough that only she and Ethan could hear. I'm going to make you regret this, he whispered. I'm going to take everything from you, everyone you love, and I'm going to make sure you watch. Get in line, Adriana said. Ethan's security moved them along before Marco could respond. The DeLuca family filed out of the ballroom in a wave of expensive suits and barely contained rage, Marco's mother making the sign of the cross like her son was being led to his execution instead of just being asked to leave a wedding. When the doors closed behind them, the ballroom stayed silent for approximately 3 seconds. Then everyone started talking at once. Adriana turned to face the remaining guests. Her family was still there, looking shell-shocked. Most of Marco's business associates had left with the family. Loyalty or self-preservation, hard to say which, but a good portion of the original 300 remained. I apologize for the disruption, Adriana said. Her voice cut through the chaos, clear and strong. I realize this isn't how anyone expected today to go. If you'd like to leave, I completely understand. But if you'd like to stay and witness an actual wedding between 2 people who chose each other freely, she looked at Ethan. We'd be honored to have you. The minister, who'd been standing frozen by the altar this entire time, finally found his voice. Miss Varelli, I'm not sure I can... Can you marry 2 consenting adults with a valid marriage license? Ethan asked. Well, yes, but then that's what we're asking you to do. The minister looked around helplessly, like someone might rescue him from this situation. No one moved. Finally, he sighed and opened his Bible. Will the bride and groom please approach the altar? Adriana and Ethan walked down the aisle together this time, equal partners. The guests who remained watched in stunned silence, probably still trying to process what they just witnessed. When they reached the altar, Adriana finally let herself look at Ethan. Really, look at him. He'd been planning this with her for weeks, had offered to do whatever it took to help her escape, but she'd never actually asked him why. You didn't have to do this, she said quietly. I know. You could have just helped me disappear, started over somewhere else. That's not what you wanted, Ethan said. You wanted him to know, to understand what he'd lost, to face consequences for the first time in his privileged life. And you were okay with making yourself a target? Because the DeLuca family doesn't forget things like this. He smiled. Adriana, I've been making myself a target since I was 16 years old and decided the people who ran the world were doing a shit job of it. Marco doesn't scare me. He should. Maybe. But you know what scares me more? He reached up and touched her face gently. The idea that you'd spend the rest of your life trapped with someone who couldn't see how extraordinary you are. Adriana felt her eyes burn. She'd cried more in the past 6 months than she had in the previous 3 years. But these tears were different. Not shame or pain or fear. Relief. We are gathered here today, the minister began, sounding like he'd rather be literally anywhere else, to join this man and this woman in holy matrimony. Adriana barely heard the traditional words. She was too focused on Ethan's face, on the steady pressure of his hands holding hers, on the fact that for the first time in 3 years, she was choosing something for herself. Do you, Ethan Cross, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife? I do. And do you, Adriana Varelli, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband? She thought about Marco, probably in a car right now making phone calls, mobilizing his family's resources, planning his revenge. She thought about her father who'd sold her like livestock and was now watching his decision blow up in his face. She thought about every person who'd ever treated her like she was less than, like she was something to be used and discarded. I do, she said. The minister pronounced them married with the enthusiasm of someone performing a root canal. You may kiss the bride. Ethan pulled her close and kissed her softly. It wasn't dramatic or passionate or any of the things wedding kisses were supposed to be in movies. It was gentle, careful, a promise that he'd be different from Marco in every way that mattered. When they broke apart, approximately half the remaining guests actually applauded. The other half looked too stunned to do anything. Adriana turned to face the crowd as Ethan's wife and realized she recognized a face near the back. Detective Sarah Martinez, one of the FBI agents who'd been investigating the DeLuca family. She was smiling and gave Adriana a small nod of approval. Ladies and gentlemen, Ethan announced, my wife and I are going to take our leave. There's still a reception with very expensive champagne and food in the next room, and you're all welcome to stay, but we have somewhere we need to be. He led Adriana back down the aisle. As they passed her family's section, her father stood up. Adriana, wait. She stopped, looked at him. I'm sorry, Vincent said. His voice cracked. I'm so sorry. I thought I was doing what was best for the family. You thought saving your business was more important than my happiness, Adriana finished. You were probably right. Your business did matter more to you. I just wish you'd admitted it instead of pretending you were doing me a favor. I never wanted to hurt you. But you did anyway. And that's something you're going to have to live with, Papa. Not me. Not anymore. She walked away before he could respond. Ethan had a car waiting outside. Not a limo. Too conspicuous. Just a sleek black sedan with tinted windows and a driver who worked for his security company. Where to, Mr. Cross? The driver asked. Airport, Ethan said. Private terminal. Adriana looked at him. We're leaving? For a couple weeks. Just until the FBI finishes processing everything you gave them and makes their arrests. Then we'll come back and deal with whatever fallout there is. He squeezed her hand. Unless you'd rather stay and face it now. She thought about Marco's threat, about the DeLuca family's reach and resources and willingness to hurt anyone they perceived as an enemy, about the fact that she'd just publicly humiliated one of the most powerful crime families in New York. Where are we going? Paris. I have an apartment there. Very secure, very private, and I'm told the honeymoon suites at the Ritz are quite nice. Adriana laughed. Actually laughed, full and genuine for the first time in longer than she could remember. Honeymoon? Well, we did just get married. Seems appropriate. This wasn't a real marriage, Ethan. This was a tactical maneuver. He looked at her seriously. It's as real as you want it to be. The license is legal. The ceremony was valid. We're actually married, Adriana. That wasn't part of the plan, I explained. She blinked. What? I told you we'd fake a wedding to humiliate Marco. Make a big show, then quietly annul it later. But that marriage license is real. The minister was real. What we just did in there legally binds us together. He paused. I should have told you before, but I was worried you'd say no. Why would you do that? Because, Ethan said slowly, I wanted to make sure you were protected. As my wife, you have access to everything I own. All my resources, my legal team, my protection. If something happens to me, you're taken care of. And more importantly, if the DeLuca family comes after you, they have to go through me first. Adriana stared at him. You married me to protect me? I married you because over the past 6 months of planning your escape, I fell in love with you, Ethan said. The protection was just a bonus. The car was moving now, pulling away from the plaza, leaving behind the wreckage of what was supposed to be her wedding to Marco DeLuca. You love me, Adriana repeated. Yeah, I do. And I know this is terrible timing, and you probably need space and time to figure out who you are outside of Marco's control, and I'm not expecting anything from you. We can get this annulled tomorrow if you want, or we can stay married and live separate lives, or... She kissed him. Not gentle this time, not careful. This was 3 years of suppressed feeling pouring out all at once, gratitude and relief, and something that might become love given enough time and freedom to grow. When she pulled back, Ethan looked dazed. Or that, he finished weakly. I don't know if I love you, Adriana said honestly. I don't know if I'm capable of love right now. Marco broke something in me, and I'm not sure how long it'll take to fix. That's okay. But I want to try. And I want to do it with you. Not because you saved me. I saved myself. You just provided tools. But because you're the first person in years who's treated me like I matter. Ethan pulled her close, and Adriana let herself relax into him. Through the car window, she watched Manhattan slide past. Somewhere behind them, Marco was probably destroying his apartment in rage. Her father was probably drinking heavily and wondering where everything went wrong. The DeLuca family was probably mobilizing their lawyers and resources and preparing for war. Let them. For the first time in 3 years, Adriana Cross, was free, and she had no intention of ever being anyone's possession again. The driver caught her eye in the rearview mirror. Congratulations on your marriage, Mrs. Cross. Mrs. Cross. The name felt strange, foreign, but not wrong. Thank you, she said. Beside her, Ethan was already on his phone, messaging his security team with updates and instructions. Planning ahead, the way he always did, making sure they were protected, that her family was watched, that the FBI had everything they needed to take down the DeLuca empire. Adriana looked at the phone in her own purse. There were probably 100 missed calls by now. Messages from her mother, her father, people demanding explanations or hurling accusations. She should probably check them. Instead, she turned the phone off and dropped it in her bag. Whatever happened next, she'd deal with it. But right now, in this moment, she was going to enjoy her freedom. The freedom lasted exactly 6 hours. They were somewhere over the Atlantic when Ethan's phone started buzzing with the kind of insistent pattern that meant something had gone very wrong. He'd been dozing with his head against the window of his private jet, fingers still loosely intertwined with Adriana's, but the vibration jolted him awake. He checked the screen, and his expression went dark. What is it? Adriana asked. Marcus. He meant his head of security, a former Marine who'd served 3 tours before Ethan had hired him away from a private military contractor. He says we need to talk, now. Ethan moved to the back of the cabin where there was more privacy and made the call. Adriana watched his face change as he listened, watched his jaw tighten, and his free hand curl into a fist against his thigh. When he came back, he looked older somehow, tired in a way that had nothing to do with the wedding or the flight. Marco's not waiting for the FBI, Ethan said. He's already moving. What do you mean? He went after your father first. Vincent's in the hospital. The world tilted sideways. What happened? Someone broke into his house around 8 this evening, beat him badly enough that he's in ICU. Your mother found him and called 911. Ethan's voice was careful, controlled. The police are calling it a robbery gone wrong, but Marcus doesn't think so. Nothing was taken. This was a message. Adriana's head started shaking. She pressed them flat against her thighs to make them stop. Is he going to be okay? They don't know yet. He's in surgery now. She stood up, paced the narrow aisle of the jet. Her father had sold her to Marco like property, had chosen his business over her happiness, had stood by while she was controlled and diminished and slowly erased. She should hate him. Part of her did hate him, but he was still her father. We need to turn around, she said. Adriana, We need to turn around, Ethan, now. That's exactly what Marco wants. He's trying to draw you back, get you somewhere he can reach you. I don't care what he wants. My father is in the hospital because of me. Because I humiliated Marco and he needed to hurt someone I care about. Ethan caught her wrist gently as she paced past him. Listen to me. If we go back now, without preparation, without a plan, Marco wins. He gets you isolated, gets you vulnerable, and I can't protect you from the entire DeLuca family if you're walking straight into their territory. So what? I just leave my father there? Let Marco keep hurting people until he gets to me anyway? No. We let the FBI do their job. Marcus says they're moving up the timeline on the arrests because of what happened to Vincent. They're hitting the DeLuca properties tomorrow morning, every business, every associate, everyone they have evidence on, including Marco. Adriana pulled her wrist free and wrapped her arms around herself. Through the window, she could see clouds illuminated by moonlight, the dark ocean somewhere far below. They were suspended between two worlds, the one she'd escaped and the one she hadn't reached yet. "My mother," she said. "Is she safe?" "Marcus has 2 people watching the hospital and 2 more at your parents' house. If anyone from the DeLuca family tries to approach her, we'll know." "And what about me? What about you? You think Marco's just going to let this go after the FBI arrests him?" "No," Ethan admitted. "I think he's going to be even more dangerous. But the difference is, I'm ready for dangerous. I've been ready since I was 16 and my sister's husband put her in the hospital for the 2nd time." Adriana turned to look at him. He'd mentioned his sister before, but never in detail. Never with that edge of old rage in his voice. "What happened?" she asked. Ethan was quiet for a long moment. Her husband was a traitor. Made millions, lost millions, made them back again. Everyone thought he was brilliant, charismatic, perfect. He stared out the window. He was also a violent drunk who liked to remind my sister that she was lucky to have him, that no one else would want her, that if she ever left, he'd make sure she regretted it. "How old were you when you found out?" 16. "She showed up at my dorm with a broken arm and a concussion, told me she'd fallen down the stairs. I believed her the first time, even the second time. By the third time, his jaw worked. I started paying attention, started documenting things the way you did with Marco, built a case against him. Did it work? Eventually. Took 2 years and most of my college fund to hire lawyers good enough to break through his connections. But we got a restraining order, got her a divorce, got him arrested for assault." Ethan finally looked at her. "That's when I learned that having money and power means nothing if you don't use it to protect the people who matter. So I made more money, built more power, and I've been using it to fuck over men like your ex-fiancé ever since." Adriana sat down beside him. "Is she okay now? Your sister?" "She's a trauma surgeon in Seattle, married to a kindergarten teacher who cries at Disney movies and has never raised his voice at her once in 8 years. He smiled slightly. "She's doing better than okay." "And her ex-husband?" "Died in a car accident 5 years ago. Single vehicle crash, no witnesses. Very tragic." Something in his tone made Adriana look at him sharply. "Ethan, I had nothing to do with it," he said. "I was in Tokyo when it happened. Have about 50 witnesses and security footage to prove it." He paused, "But I won't pretend I mourned him." The pilot's voice came through the intercom. "Mr. Cross, we're about 2 hours from our refueling stop in Iceland. Do you want me to change course?" Ethan looked at Adriana. "Your call." She thought about her father lying in a hospital bed, machines breathing for him while surgeons tried to repair what Marco's people had broken. Thought about her mother sitting in a waiting room, alone and scared, probably blaming Adriana for all of it. But she also thought about Marco's threat, about the way he'd promised to take everything from her, about the fact that going back now meant playing by his rules, walking into a trap he'd set specifically for her. "Keep going," she said. "We stick to the plan." Ethan squeezed her hand and relayed the decision to the pilot. The rest of the flight passed in tense silence. Adriana tried to sleep, but couldn't stop seeing her father's face, couldn't stop wondering if he was dying because of her choices. Ethan worked on his laptop, coordinating with Marcus and his legal team, preparing for whatever came next. They landed in Paris just after dawn, local time. A car was waiting to take them to Ethan's apartment in the 8th arrondissement, A 3-story penthouse with views of the Arc de Triomphe and security measures that would make a head of state jealous. Marcus updated me during the landing, Ethan said as they rode the private elevator up. Your father made it through surgery. He's stable but critical. Relief flooded through her. Can I call my mother? Marcus says wait until we're inside and I can set up an encrypted line. If the DeLucas are monitoring her calls, and they probably are, we don't want them tracing it back to our location.
The apartment was exactly what Adriana would have expected from Ethan. Sleek, modern, expensive without being ostentatious. Floor-to-ceiling windows filled the space with morning light. The furniture was comfortable but minimal. Everything had a purpose. Ethan led her to a study and set up a secure video call. Her mother's face appeared on the screen moments later, looking 10 years older than she had yesterday. Adriana. Her voice cracked. Where are you? I'm safe, Mama. How's Papa? He's alive. That's all the doctors will say right now. Alive, but... She pressed a handkerchief to her eyes. What did you do, Adriana? What did you do to make them hurt him like this? The accusation hit harder than it should have. I didn't do anything to Papa. Marco did this. Because you humiliated him. Because you ran off with that man instead of marrying someone who cheated on me the morning of our wedding? Adriana's voice rose. Instead of spending the rest of my life with a criminal who treated me like property? You could have handled it privately. You didn't have to make a spectacle. Mama, Marco was never going to let me leave quietly. You know that. You've always known what he is. Her mother's face crumpled. I thought if you just married him, if you gave him children, he'd settle down. He'd be better to you. Why would you think that? When has a man like Marco ever gotten better? Because I had to believe it. Her mother's voice broke completely. I had to believe it was going to be okay, that we'd done the right thing, because if I didn't believe that, then I'd have to admit we sold our daughter to a monster to save your father's business. The truth sat between them like broken glass. I know you hate us, her mother continued. I know you think we chose money over you, and maybe we did. Maybe that makes us terrible parents, but we thought... She stopped, started again. We thought you'd be taken care of. We thought the DeLuca name would protect you. We thought... You thought it was worth the price, Adriana finished quietly. Her mother didn't deny it. They sat in silence for a moment, the video connection making them feel simultaneously too close and impossibly far apart. Is there anything you need? Adriana finally asked. Anything I can do? Just stay away, her mother said. Stay wherever you are. Stay safe. Let your father and me deal with the consequences of our choices. Mama, I mean it, Adriana. Don't come back. Not until this is over. Promise me. Adriana looked at Ethan, who was standing just out of frame. He nodded slightly. I promise, she said. Her mother's face softened just a fraction. I do love you. I know I haven't shown it well, but I do. And I'm sorry for all of it. The call ended before Adriana could respond. She sat staring at the blank screen until Ethan gently closed the laptop. Come on, he said. You need to eat something. When's the last time you had actual food? Adriana tried to remember and couldn't. The wedding felt like it had happened years ago instead of yesterday. Everything before that was a blur of preparation and planning and barely controlled panic. Ethan led her to the kitchen and started pulling ingredients from the refrigerator. I'm not a great cook, he warned, but I can manage breakfast. He made omelets while Adriana sat at the counter and watched, feeling disoriented and unmoored. This should have been her honeymoon. Should have been champagne and hotel suites and pretending to be happy while Marco controlled every aspect of their trip. Instead, she was in Paris with a man she'd known for 6 months, legally married but emotionally uncertain, while her father lay in a hospital bed half a world away. You're thinking too loud, Ethan said, sliding a plate across the counter to her. How can you tell? You get this crease between your eyebrows. He demonstrated on his own face. Right there. Means you're spiraling. Adriana touched her forehead self-consciously. I didn't know I did that. Marco probably never noticed. He didn't pay attention to you, just to whether you were behaving the way he wanted. She took a bite of omelet to avoid responding. It was good. Better than good, actually. I thought you said you weren't a great cook. I said I wasn't a great cook. This is basically the only thing I can make without burning down the kitchen.
He sat down across from her with his own plate. My sister taught me when I was in college. Said every man should know how to feed himself and anyone he cares about.
She sounds smart. She is. You'd like her. He paused. She'd like you too. She has a thing about women who refuse to stay victims. They ate in comfortable silence for a while. Outside, Paris was waking up. The sounds of traffic and voices drifting up from the street below. Normal people living normal lives, completely unaware that somewhere across the Atlantic, the FBI was preparing to dismantle one of New York's most powerful crime families. What happens now? Adriana asked. Now we wait. The arrests are scheduled for 6 a.m. Eastern Time. That's noon here. Marcus will call when it's done. And if something goes wrong, if Marco somehow avoids arrest, then we adjust, make a new plan. But Marcus has been coordinating with the FBI for weeks. They have everything you gave them plus additional evidence they've gathered independently. Unless Marco has a federal judge in his pocket, and even he's not that well connected, he's getting arrested today. Adriana wanted to believe him. Wanted to trust that the system would actually work for once, that the evidence she'd gathered would be enough, that Marco would face real consequences instead of buying his way out the way powerful men always seem to do. But she'd spent 3 years learning not to trust that justice would prevail. Her phone buzzed. She'd turned it back on to call her mother and hadn't switched it off again. Now it was lighting up with message after message, notifications piling up faster than she could read them. Don't, Ethan said. I should at least see who... Adriana, don't. But she was already opening the messages. Most were from numbers she didn't recognize, reporters probably, or people who'd been at the wedding and wanted to offer opinions about what she'd done. A few were from distant relatives expressing shock or disgust, or occasionally secret support. One was from Julia. You destroyed everything, it read. I hope you're happy. I hope it was worth it. Adriana stared at the message for a long moment, then typed a response. Tell me, was he worth it? Was sleeping with your cousin's fiancé worth whatever you thought you'd gain? The reply came fast. He loved me. He was going to leave you after the wedding. We had plans. Adriana laughed, sharp and bitter. He was never going to leave me, Julia. I was too useful, too controllable. You were just entertainment. You're lying. Ask yourself why he didn't cancel the wedding this morning, why he still expected me to marry him even after I caught you together. He didn't want you instead of me. He wanted both of us, because to him, women are just things to collect. No response came. Adriana deleted the conversation and blocked the number. Feel better? Ethan asked. Not really, but at least she knows the truth now. She probably won't believe it. No, probably not. Adriana set the phone down. Can I ask you something? Always. Why did you really marry me? The actual reason, not the protection excuse. Ethan was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully. Because I've spent the last 10 years watching people like Marco take what they want without consequences. I've watched them hurt people I care about, and I got tired of just sitting on the sidelines documenting it. He met her eyes. When I met you, I saw someone who was ready to fight back. Someone smart enough and brave enough to actually win. And I wanted to be part of that, part of proving that people like Marco don't get to win just because they've always won before. That's still about stopping Marco. Okay, you want the real truth? He leaned forward. The truth is that somewhere between our 3rd meeting and our 10th, I stopped seeing you as a victim who needed saving and started seeing you as the most interesting person I'd met in years. You're sharp and funny, and you notice things most people miss. You adapted to 6 months of espionage work like you'd been doing it your whole life. And every time we met, I found myself looking forward to it more than anything else on my schedule. Ethan, I'm not done. The truth is that I told myself I was helping you escape Marco, but really I was just creating excuses to spend time with you. The truth is that when I suggested the fake wedding plan, part of me was hoping you'd want to make it real. The truth is... He stopped, ran a hand through his hair. The truth is, I've been a little bit in love with you since you told me that what you really wanted was to make Marco feel small, because that's when I knew you weren't broken. Hurt, yes. Angry, definitely. But not broken. Adriana didn't know what to say. She'd spent 3 years with Marco, who'd said he loved her but treated her like an object.
who'd proposed because their families had decided it was mutually beneficial, not because he'd chosen her, who'd probably never said anything real to her in the entire time they were together. And here was Ethan, giving her truth so raw and honest it almost hurt to hear. "I don't know if I can be what you want," she said quietly. "I don't even know who I am outside of what Marco shaped me into." "Then figure it out. Take all the time you need. I'm not going anywhere." "You say that now. I say that always." He reached across the table and took her hand. "Adriana, I didn't marry you expecting you to immediately fall in love with me. I married you knowing you needed time and space and freedom to become whoever you want to be. If that person eventually wants to be married to me, great. If not, we'll get divorced and I'll still consider it the best decision I ever made." "Why?" "Because you deserve a chance to choose your own life. And if I can give you that, then marrying you was worth it regardless of how it ends." Before Adriana could respond, Ethan's phone rang. He checked the screen and his expression shifted. "It's Marcus," he said, then answered on speaker. "Talk to me." "It's done," Marcus said. His voice sounded satisfied. FBI hit 11 locations simultaneously at 6 a.m. They have Marco, his father, his brother, and about 20 associates in custody. They're processing them now. Adriana felt something in her chest unclench. They actually arrested him. They did more than arrest him. They seized everything: bank accounts, properties, cars, businesses. The DeLuca empire as of this morning is effectively dismantled. "What about bail?" Ethan asked. "Can they post it?" Judge denied bail. Flight risk and danger to witnesses. Marco's going to be in lockup until trial, and given the evidence, his lawyers are already talking about a plea deal. Adriana stood up, suddenly unable to sit still. It had worked. Everything they'd planned, all the evidence she'd gathered, the risks she'd taken, it had actually worked. "There's more," Marcus continued. "The FBI found evidence of additional crimes during the raids. Things even worse than what Adriana documented. Human trafficking, money laundering on a massive scale, connections to 3 unsolved murders. This isn't just a RICO case anymore. This is life in prison without parole territory." "And the family?" Ethan asked. "Are they going to retaliate?" "Against who? Their leadership is in custody, their assets are frozen, and every associate with half a brain is already flipping to save themselves. The DeLuca family is finished." Adriana walked to the window and looked out at Paris. The city was beautiful in the midday sun, full of history and art, and people living their lives without fear. She thought about Marco in a holding cell, probably still furious, probably still convinced he'd find a way out of this. He wouldn't. For the first time in 3 years, she was sure of that. "One more thing," Marcus said. "Your father woke up an hour ago. Doctors say he's going to make a full recovery." The relief was so intense, Adriana had to brace herself against the window. "Thank you, Marcus. Thank your husband. He's the one who put security on your father's room before the attackers could come back to finish the job." She looked at Ethan, who was studiously examining his phone like the conversation wasn't about him. "I'll check in again in a few hours," Marcus said. "Meanwhile, enjoy Paris. You've earned it." The call ended. Adriana stood at the window for a long moment, processing everything. Marco arrested, her father alive, the DeLuca family destroyed. It was everything she'd wanted, everything she'd worked for. So why did she feel so empty? "It's the adrenaline crash," Ethan said, reading her mind again. "You've been running on fear and planning for months. Now that it's over, your body doesn't know what to do with itself. It doesn't feel over. It's not completely. There'll be a trial, testimony, your father's recovery, the fallout from the arrests. But the acute danger is past. Marco can't hurt you anymore." Adriana turned to face him. "What if I don't know how to live without being afraid?" "Then you learn, one day at a time." He stood and walked over to her. "And you don't have to do it alone. I meant what I said, Adriana. I'm here for as long as you want me." She looked up at him, this man who'd upended his entire life to help her escape hers, who'd married her knowing she might never love him back, who'd believed in her strength when she'd barely believed in it herself. "Can I ask for something unreasonable?" she said. "Always. Can we just exist for a while? Not plan anything, not prepare for threats, not think about what comes next. Can we just be 2 people in Paris with nowhere we have to be?" Ethan smiled.
I think that's the most reasonable thing you've ever asked for. He was right about the adrenaline crash. By late afternoon, Adriana could barely keep her eyes open. Ethan showed her to one of the guest rooms. She noticed he didn't assume they'd be sharing a bed, didn't push for intimacy she wasn't ready for, and she collapsed into sleep so deep she didn't dream. When she woke up, it was dark outside and someone was screaming. It took her a moment to realize the screaming was coming from her own throat. She was tangled in the sheets, sweating, her heart racing like she'd run a marathon. The nightmare was already fading, but she could still feel the edges of it. Marco's hands around her throat, Julia laughing, her father bleeding out while she stood frozen and useless. The door burst open and Ethan was there, alert and ready for danger. When he saw she was alone, no actual threat, his posture relaxed slightly. "Nightmare?" he asked. She nodded, not trusting her voice yet. He sat on the edge of the bed, careful to maintain distance. "Want to talk about it?" "Not really." "Want me to leave you alone?" She should say yes, should maintain boundaries and independence and all the things therapists probably recommended for people escaping abusive relationships, should not become dependent on another man to make her feel safe. But the room was too dark and too quiet, and she could still feel phantom hands on her throat. "Stay," she said. "Please." Ethan stretched out on top of the covers, fully clothed, close enough that she could feel his presence, but not touching her. "I'm here. You're safe. Marco's in a cell and he can't hurt you." Adriana focused on breathing, on slowing her racing heart, on reminding herself that she was in Paris, not New York, that she was free, not trapped, that the man beside her had chosen to protect her, not control her. Eventually, her breathing evened out. The panic receded. "Does it get easier?" she asked into the darkness. "Yeah," Ethan said. "Not overnight and not in a straight line, but yeah, it gets easier." She believed him. They lay there in the dark, not sleeping, not talking, just existing in the same space. And slowly, gradually, Adriana felt something shift inside her. Not healing, it was too soon for that, and the wounds were too deep. But maybe the beginning of healing, the first small step toward figuring out who she was when she wasn't busy surviving. Outside, Paris continued its eternal dance of light and shadow, art and history, endings and beginnings. And inside Ethan's apartment, Adriana Cross closed her eyes and let herself imagine a future where she got to choose everything. The call came 3 days later, while Adriana was standing in front of a Monet at the Musée de l'Oranger. She'd been staring at the water lilies for 20 minutes, trying to understand why people found them so moving. To her, they just looked like blurs of color that might have been flowers or might have been anything. But the woman standing next to her had tears running down her face, so clearly Adriana was missing something. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. Marcus's name flashed on the screen. She stepped outside to take the call into the gray Paris afternoon where rain threatened but hadn't quite started falling. "Tell me," she said. "We have a problem." Marcus didn't waste time on pleasantries. "Antonio De Luca made bail 2 hours ago." Adriana's stomach dropped. "How?" "I thought they denied bail for the whole family. They did for Marco and his father. But Antonio's lawyer argued he was less involved, lower flight risk, and the judge bought it. He's out on $10 million bond with an ankle monitor." "Where's Ethan?" "At a meeting with his legal team. I already sent him a message, but he's not responding yet." Adriana started walking back toward the apartment, her earlier calm evaporating like mist. "What does this mean? Is Antonio going to come after us?" "Unknown, but I'm not taking chances. I'm doubling security on your location and sending 2 more people to watch your parents' hospital." "My father's still there?" "Released himself this morning against medical advice. Your mother took him home." Adriana closed her eyes. Of course he had. Vincent Varelli was too proud to stay in a hospital bed while his world collapsed around him. "I need to talk to Ethan," she said. "He'll call you when he's out of the meeting. Meanwhile, get back to the apartment and stay there. Don't go anywhere alone." She was already halfway there, walking fast enough that people were giving her annoyed looks as she pushed past them on the sidewalk. The apartment was only 10 minutes away, but it felt like miles. Every person behind her could be a threat. Every car that slowed down could be surveillance. This was what Marco had done to her, turned her into someone who saw danger everywhere, who couldn't even look at water lilies without her brain cataloging exit routes and potential weapons. She made it back to the building and rode the elevator up,
her heart not slowing until the door closed behind her and she was safely inside. Ethan was already there. He was standing by the windows with his phone pressed to his ear, his posture rigid in a way that meant the conversation wasn't going well. When he saw her, he held up one finger in a wait gesture and finished the call. "I don't care what it costs," he was saying. "I want every piece of information you can find on Antonio DeLuca's current location, contacts, and communications. I want to know where he is every second of every day until he's back in custody or dead. Yes, I said what I said. Call me when you have something." He hung up and turned to her. "You heard." Marcus called. "Ethan, how did this happen? How did they let him out?" "Money and connections." His voice was flat, angry in a cold, controlled way that was somehow more frightening than if he'd been shouting. "Antonio's lawyer is one of the best in the country, the kind of guy who gets mobsters acquitted and politicians out of corruption charges. And the judge who granted bail? He's been ruling in favor of wealthy defendants his entire career. So what do? We wait. We watch. And if Antonio makes a move toward you or your family, we respond." "Respond how?" Ethan looked at her for a long moment. "However we need to." There was something in his eyes that reminded her of what he'd said about his sister's ex-husband, the car accident with no witnesses, the way he'd had an alibi in Tokyo. "You're scaring me," Adriana said quietly. "Good. You should be scared. Antonio's dangerous, maybe more dangerous than Marco because he's less predictable." Marco was all control and calculation. Antonio's the enforcer, the one they send when they need someone hurt. Adriana sank onto the couch. She'd been in Paris for 3 days, and it had almost felt like a vacation, like she and Ethan were just a married couple enjoying the city, not two people hiding from a crime family's revenge. They'd walked along the Seine, eaten at small cafes, pretended to be normal. That pretense was over now. "I should have known it wouldn't be this easy," she said. Ethan sat down beside her. "Nothing worth doing is easy. You know that." "I'm tired, Ethan. I'm tired of being afraid. Tired of looking over my shoulder. Tired of feeling like I can't breathe without wondering if it's going to get someone hurt." "I know." "Do you? Because you seem fine. You seem like this is just another business problem to solve." "I'm not fine." His voice was sharp enough that she looked at him in surprise. "I'm furious. I'm terrified that something's going to happen to you because I didn't plan well enough or move fast enough. I'm barely sleeping because every time I close my eyes, I'm running through scenarios of how Antonio could get to you." "Then why do you look so calm?" "Because falling apart doesn't help you. Staying focused does." He rubbed his face, suddenly looking as exhausted as she felt. "My sister used to ask me the same thing, why I never seemed scared when her husband was threatening us. Truth is, I was scared shitless. I just got good at hiding it." They sat in silence for a moment. Outside, the rain had finally started, pattering against the windows in that gentle way that would have been romantic if their lives weren't actively falling apart. "What happened with your meeting?" Adriana asked. "My lawyers wanted to discuss the potential legal ramifications of our marriage. Apparently, there are people questioning whether it was legitimate or if we staged it specifically to undermine Marco." "We did stage it specifically to undermine Marco. But the marriage itself is legitimate. We have a valid license, a registered officiant, witnesses. The fact that we also used it as a tactical weapon doesn't make it illegal." He paused. "They're worried someone might try to claim fraud or that you married me under duress." "That's insane. You gave me more choice in our marriage than Marco ever did." "I know that. You know that. But Marco's lawyers are going to argue anything they can to discredit you as a witness. If they can paint you as unstable or manipulative, it weakens your testimony." Adriana laughed bitterly. "Of course, I escaped an abusive engagement, and somehow I'm the manipulative one. That's how it works when you're fighting powerful people. They flip the narrative, make themselves the victims and you the villain." Ethan's phone buzzed. He checked it, and his expression darkened. Antonio just posted bail for 3 more associates, Marco's cousin Luca and 2 guys from their security team. The same Luca who was at the wedding? The same one who's suspected in at least 4 murders. Yeah. Adriana felt cold. He's building a team. Looks like it. To come after us.
Probably, or to intimidate witnesses.
Or to clean up evidence the FBI might have missed.
Ethan stood and started pacing. Marcus is tracking them, but we need to be smart about this. We need to go back, Adriana interrupted. He stopped mid-stride. What? To New York. We need to go back. Absolutely not. That's exactly what they want. Get you back on their territory where they have home advantage and… Ethan, listen to me. She stood to face him. We can't hide in Paris forever.
Antonio's out, he's gathering people, and eventually he's going to make a move. I'd rather face it head on than wait for it to find us.
That's fear talking.
No, that's strategy talking. The same strategy you taught me when we were planning my escape.
She moved closer.
You said the best way to beat people like Marco was to control the battlefield. Choose when and where you fight instead of letting them dictate terms.
That was different. How? How is this different? Because back then you were an unknown quantity. Marco underestimated you, and that gave us an advantage. Now Antonio knows exactly what you're capable of. He knows we're together. He knows we have resources and security. We've lost the element of surprise. Then we create a new advantage. Adriana was surprised by how steady her voice sounded.
We go back, we cooperate fully with the FBI investigation, and we make it very public that we're cooperating. Make it so that anything Antonio does to us becomes national news. Make it impossible for him to touch us without bringing down more heat on the family.
Ethan stared at her.
That's actually not a terrible idea. I learned from the best.
He almost smiled.
Then his phone rang again. This time when he answered, his whole body went tense.
When? He asked. Then, is she safe? A pause. Get her somewhere secure. I don't care where. A hotel, a friend's house, anywhere that's not her home. Do it now. He hung up and looked at Adriana with an expression that made her stomach clench. That was one of the guys watching your parents. Someone tried to break into their house 20 minutes ago. Your mother scared them off by screaming and turning on all the lights, but they'll try again, Adriana finished.
Yeah.
Then we're going back. Tonight. Now. Before anyone else gets hurt because of me. Ethan looked like he wanted to argue. Instead, he pulled out his phone and made a call.
Get the jet ready, he said. We're leaving in 2 hours. While Ethan coordinated their departure, Adriana packed her things. It didn't take long. She'd barely unpacked in the first place, some part of her knowing this pause was temporary. That real safety was an illusion when you'd made enemies of people like the DeLucas. She was zipping up her bag when her own phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. Hello? Adriana. The voice was female, familiar in a way that made her skin crawl. It's Julia. Adriana's grip tightened on the phone. How did you get this number? Does it matter? I need to talk to you. We have nothing to talk about. Please, just listen. Julia's voice cracked. They came to my apartment, Antonio and 2 other men. They wanted to know where you were. And did you tell them? I don't know where you are. But they didn't believe me. She stopped. When she spoke again, her voice was shaking. They said if I heard from you, I needed to tell them. They said if I didn't cooperate, they'd make sure everyone knew I was the reason the wedding fell apart. They said they'd ruin my life. Adriana felt nothing. No sympathy, no satisfaction, nothing. Welcome to consequences, Julia. I know you hate me. I know I deserve it, but I'm scared. I don't know what to do. Go to the police. Tell them what Antonio said. Get a restraining order. The police won't help. The DeLucas own half the NYPD. Then leave. Get on a plane and go somewhere they can't find you. With what money? I'm a receptionist, Adriana. I can't just disappear to Paris or wherever you're hiding. The bitterness in her cousin's voice was almost funny. Almost. You made your choice, Adriana said. You chose to betray family for a man who was never going to leave his fiancée for you. You chose to participate in my humiliation. Now you get to live with those choices. I was stupid. I know that now. Marco promised me things and I believed him, and I was an idiot. But I'm sorry. I'm really, genuinely sorry. Are you sorry you did it? Or are you sorry it didn't work out the way you planned? Silence on the other end of the line. That's what I thought, Adriana said. Goodbye, Julia.
Wait, if you won't help me, at least tell me this. Are you really married to Ethan Cross? Or was that just for show?
Adriana looked across the room to where Ethan was on the phone, his free hand gesturing as he talked, completely focused on protecting her even though she'd brought nothing but danger into his life. We're really married, she said, and unlike you and Marco, we actually chose each other. She hung up before Julia could respond. Ethan finished his call and walked over. Everything okay? Julia called. Antonio's been questioning her about my location. His expression went dark. She didn't tell him anything? She doesn't know anything to tell, but he's putting pressure on anyone connected to me. Adriana sat down on the bed. This is going to get worse before it gets better, isn't it? Probably. Ethan sat beside her. But we're prepared. Marcus has a team meeting us at the airport in New York. Your parents are being moved to a secure location. The FBI has agreed to provide additional protection in exchange for your testimony. When's the trial? Not for months, maybe longer. Marco's lawyers are going to drag this out as long as possible. And we're supposed to just live in fear until then? No, we're supposed to live our lives and let Antonio and the rest of them fear us. He took her hand. You forget, Adriana, you're not the victim anymore. You're the woman who brought down the DeLuca empire. That makes you dangerous. She wanted to believe him, wanted to feel dangerous instead of terrified, but mostly she just felt tired. The flight back to New York was quieter than the flight to Paris had been. They were both lost in their own thoughts, preparing for whatever waited for them at home. Marcus had sent updates throughout the flight, Antonio's movements, witness protection arrangements for Adriana's parents, security plans for when they landed. They touched down at Teterboro just after midnight. Marcus was waiting with 2 SUVs and 4 security personnel who looked like they ate threats for breakfast. Welcome home, Marcus said dryly. Where are my parents? Adriana asked. Safe house in Westchester. FBI has 2 agents watching them round the clock. Antonio won't get anywhere near them. And Antonio himself? At his girlfriend's apartment in Tribeca. We have eyes on the building. If he moves, we'll know. Ethan nodded. Good. Let's get to the apartment. They drove through empty streets, the city asleep or pretending to be. Adriana watched Manhattan slide past the tinted windows and felt the weight of it settling back onto her shoulders. Paris had been an escape, a brief moment of peace. But this was reality. This was the war she'd started and now had to finish. Ethan's New York apartment was in a building with security that rivaled Fort Knox. They rode up in a private elevator, walked down a hallway where cameras tracked their every move, and entered through a door with 3 separate locks. Home sweet home, Ethan muttered. It was colder than his Paris place. More modern, less lived in. Adriana got the sense he didn't spend much time here, that it was just a place to sleep between business deals and whatever else filled his days. You should get some rest, Ethan said. We have a meeting with the FBI at 9. I won't be able to sleep. Try anyway. He started toward what she assumed was his bedroom, then stopped. Adriana, I'm glad you're here. I mean, I wish the circumstances were different, but I'm glad you're not in Paris alone while all this is happening. I wouldn't be alone. I'd be with you. Yeah, but here we have resources, support, a better chance of controlling what happens next. Is that the only reason you're glad? He turned to look at her fully. No. I'm also glad because seeing you every day is the best part of my day, and I missed you the 3 hours you were in that museum looking at paintings. Despite everything, Adriana smiled. It was 1 hour, and they were water lilies. Even worse, I hate Monet. You hate Monet? Overrated. Give me Caravaggio any day. At least he painted real things instead of blurry flowers. That's the most pretentious thing you've ever said. I'm a billionaire tech entrepreneur. Pretentious comes with the territory. He grinned. Get some sleep, Adriana. Tomorrow's going to be a long day. She did try to sleep, but every time she closed her eyes, she saw Antonio's face, saw Marco in his cell planning revenge, saw Julia's apartment with men who'd hurt her for information she didn't have, saw her father in a hospital bed because she dared to choose freedom. Around 3 a.m., she gave up and went to find Ethan. His bedroom door was open, and he was sitting up in bed with his laptop, working on something that made his face glow blue in the darkness. Can't sleep either? She asked from the doorway. Too much to do. Come here. She crossed the room and sat on the edge of his bed. His laptop screen showed a complex spreadsheet full of numbers and names she didn't recognize. What is that? Every business dealing the DeLuca family has had in the past 5 years. I'm cross-referencing with the evidence you gathered to find other people who might be willing to testify. The more witnesses we have, the harder it is for Antonio to intimidate all of them. You really think that'll work? I think it's our best shot. He closed the laptop and set it aside. But honestly, I also just need to feel like I'm doing something productive instead of lying here worrying about all the ways this could go wrong. Adriana understood that impulse. The need to move, to act, to control something when everything felt chaotic. Can I stay here? She asked. Just for tonight. I don't want to be alone. You're always welcome in my bed, Adriana. For sleep, for talking, for whatever you need. She climbed under the covers beside him, keeping a careful distance. But somehow over the next hour, that distance closed. His arm ended up around her shoulders. Her head ended up on his chest. And when she finally fell asleep, it was to the steady rhythm of his heartbeat and the knowledge that at least for tonight, she wasn't facing this alone. Morning came too fast. The FBI meeting was in a nondescript office building in Lower Manhattan. Agent Sarah Martinez, the one who'd smiled at Adriana during the wedding disaster, led them to a conference room where 3 other agents waited. Mrs. Cross, Agent Martinez said, "Thank you for coming in. Call me Adriana." Adriana, then. We need to go over your testimony, make sure we have everything documented properly for the trial. This might take a few hours. It took 6. They went through every piece of evidence she'd collected, every conversation she'd documented, every detail of Marco's business dealings and personal threats. They asked her to describe the morning she'd found him with Julia, asked about her relationship with Ethan, asked if she'd ever been coerced or threatened into gathering information. By the time they were done, Adriana felt wrung out, exhausted in a way that went deeper than just physical tiredness. One more thing, Agent Martinez said as they were preparing to leave. We've been monitoring Antonio's communications. He's been in contact with several known associates, including someone we believe might be planning something. Planning what? Ethan asked. We're not sure yet, but we wanted to warn you to be extra vigilant. Don't go anywhere without security. Don't trust anyone you don't know personally, and if anything feels off, call us immediately. That's not ominous at all, Adriana muttered. Agent Martinez almost smiled. I wish I could give you better news, but the reality is you've made powerful enemies, and powerful enemies don't go down quietly. They left the FBI building with Marcus and his team surrounding them like a human shield. The SUV was parked directly in front, engine running, ready for a quick escape if needed. Adriana was about to get in when she saw him, Antonio DeLuca, standing across the street with his hands in his pockets, watching her with an expression that was almost friendly. Almost. Ethan, she said quietly. He followed her gaze and his whole body went rigid. Marcus? I see him. Marcus moved closer to Adriana. Get in the car. Now. But Antonio was already crossing the street, moving with the casual confidence of someone who knew he was untouchable. 2 of Marcus's team intercepted him before he got close. I just want to talk, Antonio said, holding his hands up. 5 minutes, that's all. You're violating your bail conditions by approaching a witness, Marcus said. I'm standing on a public street. Last I checked, that wasn't illegal. Antonio's eyes never left Adriana. Please, 5 minutes. Then I'll leave and you'll never see me again. Adriana looked at Ethan. He shook his head sharply. No, but she found herself stepping forward anyway. 2 minutes, she said, and Marcus stays close enough to hear every word. Antonio smiled. Fair enough. They moved a few feet away from the crowd, just enough for the illusion of privacy. Antonio studied her face like he was seeing her for the first time. You know, I never understood what Marco saw in you, he said. You seemed so plain, obedient, boring even. Is that what you wanted to tell me? No. What I wanted to tell you is that you made a mistake. A big one. His voice was still pleasant, conversational. You humiliated my brother. You destroyed my family. You took everything we built over 3 generations and burned it to the ground. Your family built an empire on violence and exploitation. It deserved to burn. Maybe. But that doesn't mean you get to walk away without consequences. He leaned in slightly. Marco's in jail because of you. My father's in jail because of you. Our businesses are frozen, our accounts are seized, and our name is destroyed. And you think you're just going to live happily ever after with your new husband while we rot? I think I'm going to testify against all of you, and then I'm going to live whatever life I choose. Yes. Antonio's smile widened. That's what I thought you'd say. Which is why I wanted to give you one chance to reconsider. Reconsider what? Everything. Drop the charges. Refuse to testify. Disappear with your tech boyfriend and never come back to New York. His voice dropped lower. Do that, and I'll call off the dogs. Your parents stay safe. Your cousin stays safe. You get to walk away. And if I don't, then I make you suffer in ways you can't imagine. I don't just kill you, Adriana. That's too quick, too merciful. I take away everyone you love one by one, and I make sure you watch. Make sure you know it's all your fault. Marcus was moving before Adriana could respond, stepping between them with his hand on the weapon Adriana knew he carried. That's enough, Marcus said. You just threatened a federal witness, in front of witnesses, while out on bail. You're done. Antonio held his hands up again, backing away. I didn't threaten anyone. I was just making conversation, discussing hypotheticals. He looked at Adriana one more time. Think about what I said. You have 24 hours to decide. He walked away before anyone could stop him. Adriana stood frozen, her heart pounding, while Marcus got on the phone with the FBI to report what had just happened. Ethan pulled her close. You okay? He's going to kill my parents, she whispered. He's going to kill them, and it's going to be my fault. No, we're not going to let that happen. How? How do we stop him? Ethan's expression went cold. However we need to. There was that tone again. The one that suggested he was willing to do things that existed outside the boundaries of law and morality, if it meant protecting the people he cared about. Adriana should have been horrified. Instead, she just felt grateful. 24 hours turned out to be optimistic. Antonio moved in 18. Adriana was at the safe house in Westchester visiting her father when Marcus got the call. She watched his face change as he listened, watched him signal to his team with hand gestures that meant danger, immediate, move now. What's happening? She asked. Luca's missing. He gave his FBI tail the slip 2 hours ago, and no one knows where he is. Her father, still pale and moving stiffly from his injuries, looked up from the couch where he'd been half-heartedly watching television. Who's Luca? Marco's cousin, the one who handles the family's wet work. Marcus was already moving toward the door. We need to relocate you, all of you, right now. We're in a safe house with armed guards, Adriana's mother protested. How much safer can we get? Safe houses only work if the other side doesn't know where they are. And if Luca's gone dark, that means he's planning something. They were loading into the SUVs when Adriana's phone rang. Ethan. Where are you? His voice was tight with controlled panic. Leaving the safe house with my parents. Marcus says, I know what Marcus says. Listen to me carefully. Get to the city. Come straight to my building. Don't stop anywhere. Don't talk to anyone. Just get here. What's wrong? Antonio just posted something on social media, a photo of our building, with the caption, Home Sweet Home. Adriana's blood went cold. He knows where we live. He's known the whole time. He was just waiting for the right moment to use it. She could hear voices in the background, urgent and overlapping. The FBI is sending a team, but they're 20 minutes out. Marcus needs to get you here before... The line went dead. Not disconnected. Dead. Like someone had cut a wire or jammed the signal. Adriana looked at Marcus. We just lost communication with Ethan. His expression went from concerned to lethal in half a second. Everyone in the vehicles, now. We're going to Manhattan and we're not stopping for anything. The drive took 40 minutes that felt like hours. Adriana sat squeezed between her parents in the back seat of the lead SUV while Marcus rode shotgun and one of his team drove like they were competing in a death race. The second SUV followed close behind, 2 more security personnel inside. Her mother kept asking questions Adriana couldn't answer. Her father sat in grim silence, probably calculating how much this was all costing him. Not in money, but in dignity, in status, in the respect of the business community he'd spent his life trying to impress. Adriana didn't care about any of it. She just wanted to see Ethan, confirm he was safe, confirm that Antonio's message had been psychological warfare and nothing more. They hit traffic on the Hutchinson River Parkway. "Go around," Marcus said. "There is no around. Accident up ahead. Road's completely blocked." Marcus swore and pulled out a backup phone, started making calls. But Adriana could see the tension in his shoulders, could hear the edge in his voice that meant this was bad. "How long?" she asked. "Unknown. Could be 10 minutes. Could be an hour." Her father made a disgusted sound. "But this is insane. We're sitting ducks out here." "We're in armored vehicles with trained security," Marcus said without turning around. "We're fine." But he didn't sound fine. He sounded like a man watching a trap close around him and knowing there was nothing he could do to stop it. Adriana tried Ethan's phone again. It went straight to voicemail. She tried the apartment landline. No answer. She tried Marcus's other team members, the ones who were supposed to be watching the building. No answer. "Something's wrong," she said. "I know." Marcus was out of the SUV now, standing on the highway with binoculars, scanning the traffic ahead. "Driver, can you get us onto the shoulder? We'll drive it to the next exit." "Not without damaging the vehicle." "I don't care about the vehicle. Move." They lurched onto the shoulder, the SUV's heavy frame scraping against the guardrail as they squeezed past the stopped traffic. Other drivers honked and shouted. Adriana's mother made a small sound of fear. Her father just gripped the door handle and stared straight ahead. It took 15 minutes to reach the next exit. By the time they got back onto surface streets heading toward Manhattan, Adriana felt like she might throw up from fear and adrenaline. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "You should have taken the deal. Now everyone you love pays the price." She showed it to Marcus. "Block it," he said. Don't respond." "What if it's not a bluff? What if they already have Ethan?" "Then responding won't help. Getting to the building might." They drove through the city like the laws of traffic no longer applied. Marcus had someone running interference with the NYPD, clearing their path. But even so, it felt like the streets were conspiring to slow them down. Every red light, every pedestrian, every delivery truck was an obstacle between Adriana and knowing whether the man she'd married 3 weeks ago was alive or dead. They reached Ethan's building just after noon. The street looked normal. Too normal. No FBI vehicles, no police tape, no obvious signs of trouble. Just a quiet Manhattan block on a Thursday afternoon. "Stay in the vehicle," Marcus ordered. "Not a chance." "Adriana, that's my husband up there. I'm going." Marcus looked like he wanted to argue. Instead, he nodded to his team. "Tight formation. She doesn't leave the center of the group for any reason." They moved toward the building entrance like a military unit. The doorman was at his post, looking confused but unharmed. "Mr. Cross's wife," Marcus said. "We're going up." "Of course." "But sir, there are already several people upstairs. They said they were with building maintenance." Marcus was running before the doorman finished speaking. They hit the stairs instead of the elevator. Marcus and his team moving with weapons drawn, Adriana struggling to keep up in heels she hadn't had time to change out of. Her parents stayed on the ground floor with one guard while the rest of them climbed. 30 floors. Her lungs were burning by the 20th, but fear pushed her forward. The door to Ethan's apartment was open. Marcus signaled everyone to stop. He went in first, moving with practiced silence. Adriana counted the seconds, 10, 20, 30, before he reappeared and gestured them forward. "Clear," he said. "But you need to see this." The apartment had been ransacked, furniture overturned, drawers emptied, everything that could be broken had been broken. It looked like a hurricane had torn through the space. But no Ethan. "Where is he?" Adriana's voice came out strangled. "I don't know, but look." Marcus pointed to the wall. Someone had spray-painted a message in red. "Church of St. Francis, 1 hour. Come alone or he dies." Adriana felt the world tilt. They have him. We don't know that. This could be what? A joke? They destroyed his apartment and left a ransom note for fun? It could be a trap to get you isolated. Marcus was already on his phone, calling someone. "We need backup at St. Francis. Full tactical team. They're trying to draw out Mrs. Cross." "Then it's working," Adriana said. "I'm going."
Absolutely not. Marcus, they have Ethan, my husband, the man who helped me escape Marco, who married me to protect me, who's been keeping me safe while I fell apart. You think I'm going to sit here while Antonio kills him? Going alone is suicide. Then come with me. Bring your whole team, but I'm going. She was already moving toward the door when Marcus caught her arm. Wait, at least let me call the FBI. Let me get them in position before you walk into whatever this is. We don't have time. The message said 1 hour. It's already been... She checked her phone. 40 minutes. Then we call them on the way. They made it to St. Francis in 12 minutes. The church was old, one of those Manhattan landmarks that had somehow survived gentrification and development. It sat on a corner in Midtown, stone walls and stained glass, and the kind of quiet reverence that felt out of place in the city's chaos. The FBI was already there, setting up a perimeter 2 blocks out. Agent Martinez met them on the street. We have the building surrounded, she said. Snipers on the roofs, teams at every exit. If Antonio or any of his people try to leave, we'll have them. And Ethan? Adriana asked. No visual confirmation yet, but we have thermal imaging showing at least 4 people inside. Could be hostages, could be hostage takers. We won't know until we go in. So let's go in. Mrs. Cross, I understand you're worried, but this is a tactical situation. You need to let me do what they asked. Go in alone and see what they want. That's not happening. Why? Because it's dangerous? Because I might get hurt? Adriana laughed, sharp and bitter. Agent Martinez, my father's in the hospital because of me. My cousin's being threatened because of me. And now my husband is being held hostage because of me. I'm already in this. I've been in this since the moment I decided to fight back instead of being Marco's obedient little wife. Martinez studied her face. You're sure about this? I've never been more sure of anything. Okay, but you'll be wired. And the second things go wrong, my team is coming in. They fitted Adriana with a wire so small she could barely feel it, gave her an earpiece even smaller. Marcus tried one more time to talk her out of it and failed. If this goes bad, he said quietly, Ethan's going to kill me for letting you walk in there. If this goes bad, Ethan will already be dead. So you'll have bigger problems than him being angry. She walked toward the church alone. The door was unlocked. Inside, the space was dim and cool, light filtering through stained glass in colors that would have been beautiful if Adriana's heart wasn't trying to beat out of her chest. The pews were empty except for one figure sitting in the front row. Antonio. He turned when he heard her footsteps, smiling like they were old friends meeting for coffee. You came. I wasn't sure you would. Where's Ethan? Straight to business, no pleasantries. I like that about you, Adriana. You're direct. He stood and walked toward her. Your husband is fine. For now. Whether he stays that way depends entirely on what happens in the next 10 minutes. What do you want? I told you, I want you to drop the charges, refuse to testify, disappear, and never come back. And if I do that, you'll let Ethan go? I'll let all of you go. Your parents, your cousin, your husband. Everyone walks away and we forget this ever happened. Adriana looked around the church. She could see shadows in the balcony, movement in the corners. Antonio had brought people. How many? She couldn't tell. How do I know you'll keep your word? You don't. But what choice do you have? Antonio spread his hands. You can refuse and I kill Ethan. Then I kill your parents. Then I hunt down everyone you've ever cared about and make sure they suffer. Or you can agree. And maybe we all live through this. That's not much of a choice. No, but it's the only one you have. Adriana heard Agent Martinez's voice in her earpiece. Keep him talking. We're moving into position. Why do you even care? Adriana asked Antonio. Marco's the one I humiliated. Marco's the one in prison. Why are you so invested in revenge? Because he's my brother. Because family means everything. Because you don't get to destroy what we built and walk away like it didn't matter. Antonio's casual mask slipped slightly, showing the anger underneath. You were supposed to marry him, be a good wife, give him children and run his house and smile at parties. That's all. That's all we asked of you. You asked me to disappear, to stop existing as a person. We asked you to serve a purpose, the same thing women have been doing for thousands of years. And I said no. That's what this is really about, isn't it? Not the evidence or the trial or even the humiliation. It's that I said no and made it stick. Antonio's smile was gone now. You made a choice.
Now you get to live with it. So do you.
Movement in the balcony.
Antonio's eyes flicked up just as the first FBI agent appeared. You brought the feds, he said. Not angry. Disappointed. Of course I did. Did you really think I'd walk in here without backup? I thought you cared enough about your husband to follow instructions. I care enough to make sure we both walk out of here alive. Antonio pulled a gun from inside his jacket. The church erupted into shouting, FBI agents yelling commands, Antonio's people emerging from the shadows with weapons of their own. Marcus's voice in Adriana's ear telling her to get down. Get down now. She dropped behind a pew as the first shot rang out. The noise was deafening in the enclosed space. Marble exploded where bullets hit stone. Stained glass shattered. Someone was screaming. Adriana realized it was her. Then Ethan was there. He came from a side door she hadn't even seen, moving fast despite the blood on his face and the way he was favoring his left side. He grabbed Adriana and pulled her toward the exit while bullets flew overhead. You couldn't just stay safe for once? He shouted over the gunfire. You're welcome for the rescue. This isn't a rescue. This is a shootout. They made it outside just as the FBI swarmed the building. Marcus appeared from nowhere, hustling them away from the church and into one of the waiting vehicles. Is he hit? Marcus asked, looking at the blood on Ethan's face. No, they worked me over before you got here, but I'm fine. You're not fine. You're bleeding. It's mostly someone else's blood. Adriana looked at him sharply. Whose blood? Luca's. He was the one holding me in the back room. We had a disagreement about whether I should be breathing, and I won. Ethan wiped his face with his sleeve, smearing the blood. Where are your parents? Safe. At the building with one of Marcus's people. She grabbed his hand. Are you really okay? Couple cracked ribs, maybe a concussion, nothing that won't heal. He squeezed her fingers. You shouldn't have come. You would have done the same for me. That's different. How? Because I can't lose you. The words hung in the air between them while the sounds of the raid echoed from the church. Through the SUV window, Adriana could see FBI agents leading people out in handcuffs. Antonio was among them, his hands behind his back, his earlier confidence replaced by the tight-lipped fury of someone who'd finally lost. Agent Martinez appeared at their window. We have 7 in custody, including Antonio DeLuca and 3 known associates. Luca's dead. Looks like he bled out before medical could reach him. We also found enough weapons in there to supply a small army. And charges? Ethan asked. Kidnapping, assault with a deadly weapon, attempted murder of a federal witness, conspiracy, and about 15 other counts. Between this and the original RICO case, the DeLuca family is finished. Adriana felt something in her chest release. Not quite relief. It was too soon for that, too raw. But maybe the beginning of it. What happens now? She asked. Now we process them, build the case, and you prepare to testify. With Antonio in custody, the threat level drops significantly. You'll still need security until the trial, but the immediate danger is past. The trial took 8 months to reach a courtroom. 8 months of depositions and lawyers and living in a state of perpetual tension while the legal system ground through its processes. 8 months of headlines and speculation and reporters camping outside their building. 8 months of Adriana learning how to exist in her own skin again. How to make decisions without fear. How to want things for herself instead of just reacting to what others wanted from her. She and Ethan didn't rush anything. They lived together like roommates at first, separate bedrooms and careful boundaries, while Adriana figured out who she was when she wasn't performing for someone else. Ethan gave her space but never distance, was always there when she needed him, but never demanded more than she could give. Somewhere around month 4, the separate bedrooms became one bedroom. Around month 6, Adriana stopped flinching when Ethan touched her unexpectedly. Around month 7, she realized she'd stopped thinking of their marriage as a tactical arrangement and started thinking of it as real. The trial itself was brutal. Marco's lawyers tried every trick they could think of to discredit her. They painted her as a gold digger who'd seduced Marco and then turned on him when someone wealthier came along. They suggested she'd fabricated evidence. They implied she was mentally unstable. None of it worked. The evidence was too solid, the testimonies too consistent, the pattern of criminal behavior too well documented to ignore. And when Adriana took the stand and told her story, all of it, the control and the manipulation, and the morning she'd found Marco with her cousin, the jury's faces said everything she needed to know. They believed her. Marco was convicted on 18 counts and sentenced to 35 years in federal prison. His father got 40. Antonio got life without parole for the kidnapping and attempted murder charges on top of his RICO conviction. The DeLuca empire, built over 3 generations of violence and corruption, collapsed in a single afternoon. Adriana was in the courtroom when they read the verdicts. She didn't cry or cheer or show any emotion. She just stood there, Ethan's hand in hers, and felt the weight of 3 years of fear finally lift. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed them with questions. How do you feel about the verdict? Are you glad it's over? What's next for you and your husband? Ethan handled most of it, his lawyer training kicking in with smooth non-answers and polite deflections. But one reporter pushed through to Adriana directly. Do you have anything you want to say to other women in similar situations? Adriana stopped, looked at the camera, and spoke. If you're with someone who makes you feel small, who treats you like property, who tells you that you have no choice but to stay, they're lying. You always have a choice. It might be hard. It might be scary. It might cost you everything you thought you wanted, but choosing yourself is always worth it. The clip went viral. By the next morning, Adriana's phone was flooded with messages from women she'd never met, sharing their own stories, asking for advice, thanking her for speaking up. It was overwhelming and humbling and terrifying all at once. You've become a symbol, Ethan said, scrolling through the responses. I didn't want to be a symbol. I just wanted to be free. You can be both. And maybe she could. Maybe that was the point. 2 months after the trial, Adriana started a foundation. She called it Second Choices and funded it entirely with money from the settlement she'd won in the civil case against the DeLuca family. The foundation provided resources for people escaping controlling relationships, legal support, financial assistance, safe housing, job placement. Everything she'd needed and more. Ethan helped her set it up, but it was her vision, her mission, her way of taking the worst thing that had happened to her and transforming it into something that could help others. Her father attended the foundation's launch event. He'd mostly recovered from his injuries, though he walked with a slight limp now and had sold his construction company to pay for the security he'd needed during the trial. They didn't talk much, but he shook her hand at the event and said, "You did good, Adriana. Better than good." It wasn't an apology, but it was acknowledgement. And for now, that was enough. Her mother had been harder to forgive, but she came to the foundation events too, volunteered sometimes at the intake desk, and slowly they rebuilt something that wasn't the relationship they'd had before, but was maybe more honest. Julia sent a letter 6 months after the trial. It was rambling and self-pitying and full of excuses, but the last paragraph said, "I'm getting therapy now, trying to understand why I thought hurting you would somehow fix my own problems. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know I'm working on being better." Adriana never responded, but she didn't throw the letter away either. She kept it in a drawer, a reminder that people were complicated and damage came in layers, and sometimes the best you could do was acknowledge the mess and move forward. As for her and Ethan, they settled into something that felt surprisingly normal. He still worked too much, and she had to remind him to eat actual meals instead of surviving on coffee. She still had nightmares sometimes, and he'd learned to wake her gently when she started thrashing in her sleep. They argued about stupid things like whose turn it was to unload the dishwasher and whether Die Hard was a Christmas movie. They were real with each other in a way Adriana had never been with Marco. Real and messy and human and alive. One night, about a year after the trial ended, Adriana woke up around 3 a.m. to find Ethan sitting by the window, looking out at the city. "Can't sleep?" she asked. "Just thinking." "About what?" He turned to look at her. "About how I told you once that I'd married you to protect you. And because I loved you. But I realized I never asked what you wanted from this marriage." Adriana sat up. "What do you mean?" "I mean we're actually married. Legally, socially, in every way that counts. But we never talked about what that means long term. If you want kids someday. If you want to stay in New York or move somewhere else. If you even want to stay married, or if you'd rather,
I want to stay married, Adriana interrupted. To you, specifically. You're sure? I'm sure. She got out of bed and walked over to him. A year ago, I would have told you I didn't know what I wanted because I'd spent so long not being allowed to want anything. But I've had time now, time to figure out who I am, what I like, what I want. And what do you want? I want to keep doing the foundation work. I want to help people the way you helped me. I want to stop letting fear control my decisions. And I want... She took a breath. I want to build a life with you. Not because you saved me or because I owe you or because it's convenient, but because when I think about my future, you're always in it. Ethan stood and pulled her close. That's good. Because when I think about my future, you're the only part I'm sure about. Not even the money and success and world domination? Money's just numbers. Success is subjective. World domination's overrated. He kissed her forehead. But you? You're worth upending my entire life for. You're such a romantic. I'm a realist. Romance is just realism with better adjectives. She laughed and kissed him, and for the first time since this whole disaster started, Adriana felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. Not because someone else had decided it for her. Not because she'd been manipulated or controlled or forced into a role that didn't fit. But because she'd chosen it. And that made all the difference. 5 years later, Adriana stood on a stage at a conference for survivors of domestic violence, telling her story to an audience of 3,000 people. She'd told it hundreds of times by now, to reporters, to lawyers, to rooms full of women who needed to hear that escape was possible. But it never got easier. Every time she talked about Marco, about the control and the fear, and the moment she'd found him with Julia, she felt 18 again and powerless. Then she'd get to the part about fighting back, about choosing herself, about turning her wedding into a weapon and her trauma into purpose. And she'd remember that she wasn't that scared girl anymore. She was someone who'd survived, and that was worth celebrating. After the speech, a young woman approached her in the hallway. She couldn't have been more than 22, with nervous eyes and hands that wouldn't stay still. I wanted to thank you, the woman said. I've been with my boyfriend for 3 years, and he makes me feel like I'm crazy. Like everything that's wrong is my fault. And I thought that was just how relationships were supposed to be until I heard you speak. What's your name? Adriana asked. Jessica. Miss Jessica, do you have somewhere safe you can go if you decide to leave? I don't know. Maybe my sister's place? Adriana pulled out a business card for the foundation. Call this number. We'll help you figure it out. Housing, legal support, whatever you need. Jessica took the card with shaking hands. What if I'm not strong enough? What if I try to leave and he convinces me to come back? Then you try again and again, and as many times as it takes until it sticks. Adriana squeezed the woman's hand. You're stronger than you think, I promise. She watched Jessica walk away clutching the card like a lifeline and felt Ethan's hand slip into hers. You're good at this, he said. At what? Giving people hope. I'm just telling the truth. The same truth you told me, that we always have choices, even when it doesn't feel like it. Speaking of choices, Ethan said, I have a question for you. Should I be worried? Maybe. He pulled a folder from his jacket. I've been thinking about expanding the Foundation's work internationally. There are women in countries with even fewer resources than we have here who could use support. It would mean a lot of travel, a lot of time away from New York. But I think it could really matter. Adriana looked at the folder, then at her husband. You've been planning this for a while, haven't you? 6 months. I wanted to have a solid proposal before I brought it to you. And what would your role be? Whatever you needed me to be. Funding, logistics, backup, when you need someone to argue with lawyers or negotiate with governments. Same thing I've always done. She opened the folder and scanned the proposal. It was thorough, well-researched, and exactly the kind of ambitious project that would have terrified her 5 years ago. Now it just made her excited. When do we start? She asked. Ethan grinned. I was hoping you'd say that. They flew to London first, then Geneva, then 6 other cities across Europe and Asia. They met with organizations doing similar work, with government officials, with survivors who shared their stories through translators and tears. They built partnerships and programs, and a network of support that spanned continents. It It was exhausting and exhilarating and everything Adriana hadn't known she needed. Somewhere over the Pacific on a flight back from Tokyo, Ethan turned to her and said, "I'm proud of you. I know I don't say it enough, but I am. You've taken something terrible and built something beautiful." "We've built it," Adriana corrected. "I couldn't have done any of this without you." "You could have. You would have found a way." He laced his fingers through hers. "But I'm glad I got to be part of it." "Me too." She leaned her head on his shoulder and closed her eyes, feeling the steady rhythm of the plane carrying them home. 5 years ago, she'd been on a different plane, fleeing to Paris with a man she barely knew, terrified and uncertain, and sure that her life was over. She'd been wrong. Her life hadn't ended. It had just finally begun. Back in New York, the foundation had grown into something bigger than Adriana had ever imagined. They had offices in 12 cities now, had helped thousands of people escape situations like hers, had trained lawyers and social workers and advocates in how to support survivors without re-traumatizing them. Marco was still in prison and would be for decades to come. Adriana didn't think about him much anymore. He'd become irrelevant, a footnote in the story of her life instead of the main character. Sometimes she still had nightmares. Sometimes she still felt the old fear creeping in when a door slammed too hard or someone raised their voice. But those moments were rare now, and when they came, she had tools to handle them. Had a therapist she trusted, and a support system that actually supported her, and a husband who understood that healing wasn't linear. On the 5-year anniversary of the wedding that wasn't, Ethan took her back to the plaza. "Why here?" Adriana asked as they stood in front of the building. "Because this is where it started, where you chose yourself over what everyone else wanted for you. I thought we should commemorate that. By going inside? By renewing our vows, doing it right this time, not as a tactical maneuver or an escape plan, but as an actual celebration of choosing each other." Adriana looked at the building where she'd walked down the aisle once in a dress someone else had chosen, toward a future someone else had written. And now Ethan was offering her the chance to do it again, but on her own terms. "Okay," she said, "but I get to pick the dress this time." "Obviously." They held a small ceremony 2 months later. Just close friends, Ethan's sister and her family, Adriana's parents who'd slowly become actual parents again over the years of difficult conversations and honest reckoning with what they'd done. No DeLucas, no business associates, no one who wasn't there because they genuinely cared. Adriana wore a dress she'd chosen herself, simple and elegant, and nothing like the Vera Wang monstrosity Marco had selected. She walked down the aisle alone because she didn't need anyone to give her away. She already belonged to herself. When she reached Ethan, he was crying. "You're not supposed to cry," she whispered. "Too bad. You're beautiful, and I'm emotional about it." The ceremony was short. No long speeches or traditional vows, just promises they'd actually keep. "I promise to choose you every day," Adriana said. "Not because I have to, but because I want to." "I promise to be worthy of that choice," Ethan replied. "Every single day." They kissed and their friends cheered, and for a moment, Adriana was back in that church 5 years ago, hearing gunshots and fearing for her life. But then the moment passed and she was here, now, safe and loved and free. After the ceremony, Agent Martinez approached her with a glass of champagne. "I have news," she said. "Marco's appealing his sentence. His lawyers filed the paperwork last week." Adriana took a sip of champagne. "Will it work?" "Unlikely. The evidence is solid, and he's already exhausted most of his legal options. But I wanted you to know in case it makes headlines." "Thanks for the warning." Adriana looked around at the celebration, at all the people who'd helped her survive and rebuild. "But honestly, he's not my problem anymore. He's yours." Martinez smiled. "I like the way you think, Mrs. Cross." "Me too," Adriana said. Finally. The foundation continued to grow. By year 7, they'd helped over 10,000 people escape controlling situations. By year 10, they'd changed laws in 3 states, expanded to 15 countries, and trained thousands of advocates in trauma-informed support. Adriana became a regular speaker at conferences and universities. She wrote a book about her experience that became a bestseller and donated all the proceeds to the foundation. She testified before Congress about the need for better protections for victims of intimate partner violence. She was busy and fulfilled and genuinely happy. And then,
On a random Tuesday morning, when she was 34 years old and had been married to Ethan for 10 years, she discovered she was pregnant. She stared at the test for a solid 5 minutes, her brain refusing to process the information. A baby. She was going to have a baby. With Ethan, who'd proven over a decade of marriage that he was the opposite of Marco in every way that mattered. Who'd given her space and support and love without conditions. Who'd believed in her strength even when she'd forgotten she had any. She found him in his study, working on funding proposals for the Foundation's expansion into South America. "I'm pregnant," she said. He looked up from his laptop, blinked. "You're what?" "Pregnant. As in, there's going to be a tiny human who's half you and half me in about 8 months. Ethan stood up so fast he knocked over his chair. Do you want? I'm scared, Adriana admitted. I'm terrified, actually. I don't know if I'll be a good mother. I don't know if I can give a child what they need when I'm still figuring out how to give myself what I need. You'll be an amazing mother. You don't know that. Yes, I do. Because you're kind and brave and you've spent the last decade helping people rebuild their lives. Because you know what it's like to feel powerless, and you'll make damn sure your kid never feels that way. He crossed the room and took her hands. But more importantly, do you want this? That was the question, wasn't it? Did she want this child, this future, this completely terrifying new chapter? Adriana thought about the girl she'd been at 21, walking down the aisle toward a man who'd never loved her. Thought about the woman she'd been at 28, standing in a church while bullets flew. Thought about who she was now, strong and scarred and still fighting, but also building something beautiful. Yeah, she said, I want this. Ethan kissed her, and somewhere in the middle of it, she started crying. Not sad tears, not scared tears, just the overwhelming emotion of realizing that the life she'd built, the real, messy, complicated, beautiful life, was about to get even bigger. Their daughter was born on a snowy January morning. They named her Elena, after Ethan's sister who'd survived her own nightmare and come out stronger. She had Adriana's dark eyes and Ethan's stubborn chin and a cry that could wake the dead. Adriana held her in the hospital room and felt a love so fierce it was almost painful. Hello, little one, she whispered. Welcome to a world where you get to choose who you become. Ethan stood beside them, his hand gentle on Adriana's shoulder. She's perfect. She's going to be a handful. Good. The world needs more handfuls. Adriana looked up at her husband. This man who'd upended his life to help her escape hers, who'd married her when she was broken and waited patiently while she healed, who'd built a future with her that neither of them could have imagined. Thank you, she said. For what? For seeing me when I was invisible. For believing I was worth fighting for. For giving me the chance to choose you. You don't have to thank me for that. You were always worth it. He kissed the top of her head. Besides, you did all the hard work. I just provided tools and moral support. And love. And love, he agreed. But that part was easy. You made it easy. Elena squirmed in Adriana's arms, making small sounds that would probably turn into full screaming soon. But for now, in this moment, they were just a family. Not perfect, not without their scars and struggles, but real and whole and chosen. Outside the hospital window, New York stretched out in all its messy glory. Somewhere in the city, the Foundation was helping someone escape their own nightmare. Somewhere, a woman was making the choice to save herself. Somewhere, a life was beginning. And in this room, Adriana Cross held her daughter and felt grateful for every hard choice that had brought her to this moment. She'd started this story as property, as someone else's possession, as a woman who'd been taught that she had no choices. She was ending it as herself. Finally, completely, unapologetically herself. And that was worth everything she'd had to fight through to get here.